So, as we've been doing in recent nights here on The Tonight Show, we're having another discussion with a panel of 4 people giving us their views as to why they're voting yes or no, and then having a discussion between all of us. So our 4 guests tonight are here with us. I'm going to start with you, please, Teresa Law, and just in a minute, please, outline why it is that you're voting no on Friday.
On Friday, I, along with 200 lawyers, including 3 former High Court judges, will be voting no. The right to life is a fundamental human right, the cornerstone of all other human rights. And the purpose of human rights is to protect a vulnerable minority. And the baby in the womb is the most vulnerable of us all. And repeal and voting yes means that all unborn children will lose the constitutional protection that they currently have. That's the right to life in the 8th Amendment. And the referendum isn't about the harrowing, awful cases that we all have such difficulty with and we have such sympathy for. It's about this government introducing a very liberal abortion regime, unrestricted abortion up to 12 weeks with no reason, and up to 6 months, 24 weeks, where there's a risk to the life and health, including mental health, of the mother. In 1967, abortion was introduced in the UK to try and resolve the very tragic cases. And now for every 4 babies born, there's 1 abortion. No one had a clue what life in the womb looked like in 1967. We know now. And there are good, compassionate people on both sides of this debate, but the proposals here are so extreme. I would ask you to vote no and to let the government come back with something more palatable and more kind for mothers and unborn babies.
Mary Lou McDonald, your case for a yes vote, please.
Well, Ivan, my point of departure in my rationale for a yes vote is that the 8th Amendment has everything to do with what are referred to as hard cases. The fact is that we currently have a legal regime that obliges women who are pregnant because of rape or incest. The state coerces those women and girls and insists that they carry those pregnancies to term. The truth is that we currently have a legal regime that in a case where there is a diagnosis of fatal fetal anomaly, those women and families are also told carry that to term, irrespective of how you feel about it, or else we exile them to the United Kingdom or beyond. I'm going to vote yes because women's lives and our health matter. I'm going to vote yes because the truth is that as we speak today, 3 women and girls will have consumed abortion pills. They'll have done so with absolutely no medical supervision. They will have done so in fear of a criminal sanction. I'd be voting yes because I want our doctors to act. I want them to care for women and to protect our lives.
Declan Ganley, your case for no, please.
I've been in the technology sector for 25 years, and it struck me today that if we were to vote yes on Friday, our data will have more protection than our unborn children. My wife was pregnant with our 3rd child in New York, and our 3rd child was, the doctors told my wife that there were deformities, that there were problems. And the first thing that they recommended was an abortion. We didn't take that advice, and today Clementine is a healthy young woman and a student. I don't want women to be put in that same situation where abortion becomes the first things that ends up being recommended. Nobody wants that. We can do better in this country. Ireland has a great empathy. We've always done well by mothers and children in this country. We should treasure what we have in our Constitution, the 8th Amendment, keep it there and do better for women and babies as I know we all can. I know we can do that. And the 8th Amendment is a very, very precious recognition of human rights that's unique. Let's keep it. Let's vote no on Friday.
Micheál Martin, why are you on the yes side?
Well, fundamentally, I think this is a very complex, difficult issue. Many passionate views held genuinely by many people. But I'm voting yes because the reality is that the 8th Amendment has not changed the fact that, has not made Ireland a country without abortion. Retaining the 8th Amendment will not make Ireland a country without abortion. And I'm voting yes because the 8th Amendment has been shown to cause real damage to women. It has also damaged the quality of care that medical professions can give to women. It forces women who are the victims of rape and who become pregnant as a result of rape and incest to go through with their full pregnancies. In the context of fatal fetal abnormalities, it forces women to go to Liverpool and England to have their terminations and compounds the trauma in terms of not being able to bring their babies home for burial and so on, and we've heard those cases. There has to be a balance in life between our own personal beliefs and the degree to which we're willing to impose those beliefs on others through the making of law. And
Okay, well-
voting yes, I'm striking a balance, I think, in favour of women and to have a humane and compassionate response to the crisis pregnancies that many women find themselves in.
You've all had the opportunity to make your say. Please feel free to interact with each other. Now, Declan, your own personal story, which is to many people an inspiring story, and it worked out excellently for you, but it could also be pointed out that you had a choice in New York. You had the choice where you could have gone for abortion, but you decided not to. Why deny that choice to Irish families who might be in the same situation that you and your wife were in?
We did, and we did have a choice. You're quite right, Matt. But it's interesting that it wasn't the 10th thing that was recommended, abortion. It was the first thing. And when Delia, my wife, immediately said, well, that's not going to happen, he said, actually, I'm relieved that you said that. He said, but I had to make that recommendation for liability reasons, whatever the reasons were.
And what makes you think that other women and other fathers as well wouldn't make the same choice that you and your wife made? Did you not trust them to do that?
I think that when you put people into a situation like that, where people feel that a professional presenting an option to them where it's a first or very quick, a fast option, abortion should not be ever be the first thing that's recommended. It shouldn't be. I don't think anybody actually thinks that that's the case in the country.
By retaining the ban, you're foisting your choice on everybody.
No, I'm not foisting my choice on everybody. By retaining the Eighth Amendment, all we're doing is keeping in place the human right that our Constitution recognises of something that's scientifically irrefutable, that these are unique human individuals, boys and girls that haven't been born yet, but they're entitled to one thing, just one thing, the right to life.
Can I just say, just to set out the parameters correctly, first of all, the right to life and the right to fetal life is internationally recognised. And it's recognised in regimes, by the way, where there is no written constitution and where there is no Eighth Amendment. So to suggest that post the Eighth Amendment that life in the womb has no rights is simply wrong. And in fact, if you study the legislation that's proposed, you will see how wrong you are.
The Supreme Court said it's the only right they have.
Secondly, Declan, you seem to have a very, very troubling thesis here. Your view seems to be that but for the Eighth Amendment, every child in the womb is imperiled, as though the Eighth Amendment is the imperative for women when we are pregnant and when we deliver and care for and love our children. I want to tell you that's wrong. I was born before 1983. Actually, I think all of us here are pre-1983. The Eighth Amendment had absolutely nothing to do, good, bad or indifferent, with our arrival onto this world. Our mothers in particular and our parents had everything to do with it. And I think you need to trust women. I also think you need to respect women. And I respect the fact that Delia and you made a choice, Declan.
I respect
that immensely.
I have two young daughters.
I do not afford to you the right to make choices for other people. That is you vastly overstepping your rights.
And neither do I, Mary Lou. But I want to be very clear. It's not about making choices for other people. Human rights, recognition of human rights, isn't about recognising choices for other people. These are the basic human right to be allowed to live is not somebody else's choice. It isn't somebody else's choice. You had the Dred Scott case in the US Supreme Court in 1857 that said that an African-American man was less than a human being, didn't even have standing before the court. Now we have a situation where we're being asked for the first time in our history to strip away the rights, existing human rights, of one part of the children of our nation.
Micheál first and then
I think
Teresa,
Declan's
please.
original story actually underpins the Yes campaign, actually, because culture trumps law is what you're saying. You had a value system. I don't believe for one moment that voting yes and repealing the Eighth Amendment will automatically change the value system, the culture of Irish people or Irish women. I don't actually believe...
But in every country that there's been abortion, the rates have gone up.
I just want to make my point here.
True.
I spoke to Louise Kenny, an obstetrician, 25 years, working in England and in Ireland, and she said she's never yet met a woman who demanded an abortion, but she met women who needed a termination of pregnancy. And
What's being offered here-
she's a woman who specialised in high-risk pregnancies.
And what's being offered here is unrestricted
no.
abortion for no reason.
What we're looking at here is
up to 12 weeks.
That's what we're doing
And
here.
that is the part of this proposed legislation that is giving people
you know,
pause for thought. You changed your mind. A lot of people who are committed yes voters have now changed their mind because this is too extreme.
No, it's not extreme at all. And if you look at the work of the Oireachtas Committee and the members, why did they pick 12 weeks? Why did they ultimately decide on 12 weeks? Because they wanted to create a legal framework that was humane, that could facilitate, for example, women who are victims of rape, incest, and that also could ensure that women who may be taking the abortion pill right now in their bathrooms and their homes would no longer be at risk, and that would have medical supervision and medical care into the future. It's about protecting women. It's about the rights of women
But you've talked about those
to avoid
horrible
damage to their
exceptional
health.
cases that we are all traumatised by, and we've heard the stories, and we are obliged to hear these stories. We're supposed to do this, and we have compassion. But you're talking about a compassion. There's compassion for a human being, of course, in those terrible situations. But does that mean that we have to extinguish the compassion we have for a child and to extinguish their right to life?
We're rebalancing rights here in terms. The law is too absolute.
You don't balance by removing entirely.
But we're not removing it entirely.
Yeah,
You are removing it entirely.
We're not removing it entirely.
You're taking a fundamental right out of the Constitution.
Sorry, just for the
Supreme Court
purposes
have
of
held
clarity.
that
Mary
all
Lou.
constitutional
Just for clarity,
protection
the legislative framework as proposed still retains as a criminal offence the intentional destruction of the unborn, outside of that which is legally permissible. That's the situation. Now, we need to just be real here as well, because I listened to our colleagues say, if it was a different proposal, we'd feel differently. This is too extreme, they say, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, that in fact this has been well calibrated, thoroughly debated and discussed.
It's more extreme than the UK law.
When the protection in life during pregnancy legislation came through the House in 2013, we heard the same story. That was too extreme. That was to be catastrophic. And by the way, so as viewers know, that particular piece of legislation was about interventions where the woman's life was at stake. Our lives were at stake. And that was to be a catastrophe. That, we were told, was going to open up floodgates. That was going to be a threat to every child, the moral fibre of Irish women who have to be policed after all. And all of that was wrong. And you were wrong then.
But the reality
and you are wrong.
You were
Sorry,
wrong
Declan,
now.
Declan, you interjected there.
Mary Lou, you don't know me.
Sorry, Declan, you said the proposal is more extreme than the UK. Just sustain that argument, please.
The UK law, as it stands at the moment, you don't have the same requirement, the same rule for up to 12 weeks. Furthermore, you are required to have an evaluation by doctors up to 24 weeks. We have up to 24 weeks, and this isn't being talked about enough. As proposed at the moment, you can have an abortion with a sign-off of an obstetrician and another medical health professional. You can have an abortion up to 24 weeks. Now, there's nothing compassionate about an abortion at 24 weeks. An abortion at 24 weeks...
Mary Lou,
only in circumstances, only in very specific circumstances.
In those situations, I mean, you're talking about... But I mean, you're talking about the dismemberment of an unborn baby at that point.
Okay, well, so you made the point,
weeks.
Declan, so Micheál, do you want to respond to
Not
that?
right. Head 4 of the proposed bill is very clear. A termination shall only be lawful where the fetus has not reached viability. It's very clear, Declan. And this has been very dishonest presentation of what... let me finish,
Declan, let him finish, please.
Viability. If you look at the Oireachtas report again and all the evidence given by all of our obstetricians, where the baby is viable in any circumstance, they will deliver the baby. And I trust our paediatricians, I trust our neonatologists in this country who
So are you saying
they
there'll be
want...
no abortions at
What I'm
5
simply saying to you
months?
is, where a baby is viable, there'll be no abortion.
Will there be
And
abortion
that is a crucial
under
point.
mental health?
Now, in terms of the British law is far less restrictive.
You're not answering my question.
Far less restrictive than what has been proposed by the Oireachtas
But there's a ground
committee.
with the UK law.
Much less restrictive.
Teresa.
There's
the
a
British
ground
law
for the
is.
UK law. Well, can we
for
talk
example,
about viability then? And can I... you shared your story tonight with us, Declan. Can I share mine? I have twins. They're 22 years of age. See, we didn't have a clue in 1967, obviously, that, you know, no ultrasound. You didn't know what life in the womb was like. I saw my twins at 8 weeks. I saw the scan. They were born prematurely at 29 weeks. There was a baby at the same time in the hospital, born at 24 weeks. There was such life in all of those children. I was told that my boys aren't going to probably breathe, that they're not going to cry, that they will be taken down straight away to intensive care and they will be put on life support. They roared like bulls. They were carried down in shawls and they were put into an incubator and there was a little bit of oxygen. And you know what? So when I hear about a baby of 24 weeks, and I think of the other baby that was born at that time who has thrived as well.
Teresa, what's the point in this? Because
the point is there's such life at a very early gestation.
Yes, yeah, but we're not talking about ending life at 24 weeks unrestricted. We're talking about where there's a threat to the life of the mother or serious harm to the health of the mother.
Including mental health.
Yes.
Why do you have a problem with mental health?
90% of
Because
abortions
mental
in
health,
the UK, of the, I think it's the
the
190,000
in the UK,
abortions
completely
are carried out under the mental health grant.
But do you not accept that head 4 is very restrictive?
There's no requirement for a psychiatrist.
You're giving a very false and wrong impression.
No, I don't think
There's two medical practitioners.
Where does it say psychiatrist?
No, it says 2 medical practitioners have to certify. I didn't say it said psychiatrist.
Oh, well, it doesn't.
There's 2 medical practitioners.
You didn't require one.
Sorry,
And yet most abortions in the UK happen under mental health grounds, and you haven't put it in the bill.
Mary Lou,
Can I make this point? Can I make this point? The current situation, and we can at least agree on this, is that Irish women procure terminations of pregnancy in Britain under British law.
That's a shame on all of us.
What we have to do, and what we need to actually just face up to, is that we need Irish law. We need an Irish system of regulation that cares for, that is balanced, that is considered, and that works in an Irish context. Micheál is absolutely correct.
And doesn't take away the right of the child.
Late abortion is specifically outlawed. That is a matter of fact. There are grounds for interventions, emergency, in terms of a woman's life and her health. And yes, mental health is included in that. And can I just say, in the course of this debate, a huge amount of distress has been caused to people by the trivialisation of mental health, as though women and girls will pretend or make believe that somehow they are suffering from suicidal ideation or are in fact suicidal.
It did sound like you were diminishing the mental health.
That is covered. If a woman, unfortunately, is suicidal, she is entitled legally to an abortion in this country because of the act that you mentioned earlier, the 2013 Act. She is entitled to an abortion.
I know what the law is. I'm pointing
what
at the
if she
fact
isn't
that
suicidal and has serious
have
mental
sought
health
to
issues
trivialise
arise?
mental health. I think that's outrageous.
I think it's very
It's
interesting
outrageous.
that you've mentioned the 2013 Act.
Well, Mary,
Because
you mentioned
the argument that you have made now and Declan have made are the very same arguments that were made in 2013. If you allow for suicide, the floodgates will open. And the women in Ireland will have abortions in great numbers.
How many do we
There was
know
one
have actually
case,
taken advantage of that?
seven on the basis of suicide since 2013,
Of that,
and one
legislation,
one in 2016. All of the false arguments in 2013 have proven to be that, false. And they're being trotted out again now in the context of the heads of legislation that the Minister has produced on foot of the Oireachtas Committee
You know what?
reports.
If a girl is in crisis,
Yeah.
why isn't the crisis being addressed? Why aren't we looking after the reasons that she's in crisis? Do you not think that these proposals are suggesting, if you get pregnant, yes, it is the end of your life. It's all over.
No, I tell you.
And we will provide abortion,
Teresa, can I tell
rare,
you-
legal and safe.
Okay. Last Monday, I went to meet a social worker, and I spent 2.5 hours with her. She's retired. And she had emailed me the night I made my speech in Dáil Éireann, and she thanked me. And she said, I'm reminded of the 11-year-old child who was raped by her neighbour and who became pregnant. And she said to me last Monday, our state forced that child to go through with the pregnancy. Now, in my view, these are the real cases that are out there, and they happen regularly. She told me about other cases that she had to deal with. And my point is,
what I would say
we
to
have to deal with that.
Okay.
What I would say to
There's a
that,
way of
what I
dealing
would
with
say
that.
to that woman is that we need to vote no on Friday. And the reason that we need to vote no on Friday is nothing is being done in this bill to address... we're being asked to take away the rights of all unborn children for these rare cases.
But what about- it's
and,
not rare, but you see-
and that's not where... it is rare in terms of the number of abortions that happens. You didn't restrict
If you
it.
talk to people
you
at
have
the coalface,
asked, you
if
have,
you talk to people
I
at the
talked to
frontier
a
of
social
service,
worker in...
they will tell you this
so
is
let me
not
tell you about
rare.
the social
Okay, one
worker.
voice at a time.
Why didn't
I
you
made a-
limit your proposals
I'm-
to those rare cases?
They are limited.
Why? No, they're not.
Because legally, and
No, the
constitution-
problem, Micheál, is the 12 weeks.
And you know
Sorry.
what?
People
Sorry,
can't.
sorry.
Yes,
Hold
Mary
on,
Lou
hold
in
on,
this,
hold-
please.
hold on a second. You see, first of all, we can't, they're called hard cases. Let's just say they're real cases, real live, and they're not as rare as you are suggesting. The fact is that we could not legislate for those cases because of the Eighth Amendment. In fact, the Eighth Amendment is designed specifically to prevent us legislating for such
You know
cases.
what? There will be
Sorry,
another
secondly-
referendum on this issue. If you don't get what you want this time, if the Irish
Secondly,
people don't agree to strip away the
Declan,
rights of
Declan,
all unborn children,
Declan, don't
we'll,
try
be
that
we'll be
tactic.
back here again in 18 months.
Okay.
We will.
Declan, the
And you know-
other thing is this, and let's just say this. The best guarantor for the safety of the child is their mother. And I find it astonishing for people who profess to be pro-life and who celebrate, as you just did there, Teresa,
All right,
your
we're going
lovely
to take a
boys
break.
arrived,
Mothers
that you have
against
such,
their
you've such a
faith.
negative
Mothers have a
view
primeval
of
love
other...
for
We will
Precisely.
have
Can I
plenty
say
of
about
time
the-
to resume this debate.
Okay.
We're going to take a short break. Our panel will be staying with us.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion. Declan Ganley, I want to go back to something that you said in your opening statement. You said, we have always done well by mothers and children in this country. But what about things like the illegal adoptions, the Magdalene laundries, the mother and baby homes? Did we really do well on behalf of mothers and children? And if we keep being told that we can do better, do you really think we're going to be in a situation where women will say there's no need to have an abortion because everything will be looked after for us?
There have been, of course, in our history, grave errors that were made in the past. But by and large, yes, this country has been a great country for mothers and for children. Family means a lot in this country. It's why my family moved back from England and came back home to this country. There's something different and very special about Ireland. It's why I live here.
Wouldn't that suggest that's the culture that means we won't have widespread abortions if we give people choice? That we won't go the way the figures the UK and the other countries that we're consistently told?
I don't know that it does, Matt. I think
Why,
that
because the culture's different in this way?
I think that I think you shift culture. I think when you take away human rights, when you say that these children of our nation that we currently recognise in our Constitution are no longer recognised by our Constitution, that you remove all of their rights from the Constitution and replace it with the fundamental right to termination of pregnancy rather than their fundamental right to life, I think things are going to be different.
Mary Lou,
things are
have
going
we
to
always
change.
done well by our mothers and children?
No, in fact, you could have added to your list symphysiotomy, you could have added Hep C.
Cervical
More
cancer.
recently, you could have, on the contrary, and I say this is, I'm as proud an Irish woman as any. But the fact is that in our history we have had a deeply misogynistic culture. We have had a culture that regarded women as second-class citizens, that we weren't paid the same, we didn't have the same employment opportunities. And by the way, that still pertains in certain respects to this day. And the time has come now to change all of that. And you are wrong. You are simply wrong to keep repeating the notion that the right to life is stripped wholesale. That is not the case. There was a right to life pre-1983, and that remains the case. And as I've said to you already, but you don't seem to be conversant with the facts, the fact of that right is explicitly recognised in the legislative schedule.
I have to put it to both you politicians that you're being disingenuous on this point. That you may say, if you vote yes and remove the constitutional restriction, this means that, these heads of this bill. But the truth is, as a former parliamentarian myself, politicians are like 26A buses. They come and they go. And once you take this away from the people, a future Dáil, a future Minister for Health, and you might decide one day in government, Mary Lou, I'm in favour of a woman's right to choose, period, just like that. And there would be nothing the people could do about it. This is the last time, if people vote yes, Micheál, that they will ever control this issue, and a future Dáil can do what they like.
Ivan, from the foundation of the state, up to the early 1980s before the Eighth Amendment, we didn't have this provision in the Constitution and the world didn't collapse. We should trust ourselves a bit more as a people. And I can't predict the future no more than you can. Life evolves, life changes. Different generations will respond differently to issues
But it won't go
as
back
they
to the
evolve.
people, is my point.
It could, just as equally as it's been decided by the
but can I
legislature.
say-
Just wanna
I
answer
mean,
this
no one would have thought in the 80s, actually. And I would argue it was a part of the American evangelicalism that came in here, which was quite foreign to our approach, actually, in terms of religion up to then. And I think that came in here. It was kind of a different type of what I would call an excessive lay zeal that came into our society that resulted in this going into the Constitution. It was the wrong place for it, in retrospect, looking back on it. It's
But
too
Mary Lou,
cruel,
aren't you
it's
in
too
favour
inhumane
of
as
a
it is.
woman's
But
right to
listen,
choose?
here's the issue, though. The law is made in full public view. The law isn't made in secret. The work at committee, the work on the floor of the Dáil is in full public view. And actually, this is very much in the hands of the people. I would argue that
It is now,
the people
at the moment.
hire us. No, the people hire us. The people fire us. The people ultimately direct the pace and the direction of public policy. And let me tell you this, the greatest evidence of this has actually been in Irish politics, not the eagerness to act on this issue, but the actual refusal, the hesitancy, because there was the sense that this issue was toxic. So the people are always in the
We're
driver's
giving you a fair
seat.
crack.
Regina Doherty said on Pat Kenny's show that the intentions of people, she was talking about the intentions of people who inserted Article 43.3 in 1983, and she hoped it was for a good reason. It was to take it away from politicians and to let the people decide. And you were talking about trusting women, and people are talking about trusting various people and women's rights. This is beyond gender, it's beyond religion, it's beyond politics. It is human rights. It's a human rights issue.
Yeah, but
And what you're talking about taking away the right to life of a very, very vulnerable category of human being, the unborn boy and girl.
No, you're talking, Teresa, about balancing in an appropriate fashion the rights of a pregnant woman and the rights of a zygote
She needs
fetus
support.
embryo.
Why aren't you supporting women?
Teresa,
Why
I
aren't
do,
you helping them in this crisis?
Can I tell you, I do, and I respect that instinct. But don't use that as a carte blanche to say, we will support you, but we will deny you any level of adult autonomy, any level of choice, even in the most awful of circumstances.
I'm not saying that, but why didn't you limit this? Why didn't you limit the proposal to the dreadful cases that you have mentioned
Because,
tonight?
as
Why wasn't
Micheál
that
set
done?
out, the 12 weeks was specifically chosen.
I'm sorry. It's
to
already
allow...
been done. You could amend the Constitution.
No, we couldn't.
That was possible.
That's
No,
a
I'm
can
sorry.
argument.
That
That
was
is
possible.
a can
You
argument.
amended the Constitution. It was amended in 1992 to allow for travel and
no,
information.
yeah, can I just deal with that?
There could- okay.
How hypocritical in hindsight is that? It's okay that we put into the Constitution that you can travel to England to have an abortion. It's okay to provide a service there to give you information that you can go to England to have an abortion, but we'll pretend it doesn't happen. We'll pretend it's not part of Irish life.
Michael,
that, to
that
me,
rape case
that
which you
is the
specifically
ultimate
spoke
hypocrisy.
about.
No, you
It's
can't.
easier to
because, okay,
have
I'll tell
One
you
second,
what.
Teresa,
If I could
you'll
do-
come back to me all right.
have you read the evidence that was presented by Tom O'Malley and other significant legal experts to the Oireachtas Committee, who went through the irreconcilability of dealing with rape and incest in the Constitution? That the reason they came down on the 12 weeks,
We're
and
not
by the way,
voting on rape and
reluctantly
incest.
came
I'm
down on the
Sorry,
12
I have
weeks
the greatest
was
of
to
respect
create
for Thomas O'Malley.
was to create the legal
He has
framework.
a great legal mind.
it's not just
but can
him.
I say that the abortion on demand up to 12 weeks, it's a catch-all provision, and that's what we're relying on. But where there's a political will, Micheál, you know very well,
it's not-
where there's political will, there is always a legal solution.
But we've been 35 years waiting for this so-called legal solution, which has never arrived. And don't forget the prevalence of the
Well,
abortion.
if people vote
if I could
no,
just make
I'm sure you will find
Don't
the
forget the
political will.
prevalence of the abortion pill up to 10 weeks, which means young women and women generally are taking the abortion.
It's a terrible problem in the UK still,
But
despite the fact
you
that it's
keep on
legal
saying it's a terrible problem. It's a shame. We can do something about it. Irish women do not have to go to Liverpool and do not have to go to England if they're diagnosed with a fetal abnormality in pregnancy.
Let's bring
we should
Declan
allow
into
them the
this.
dignity and the humanity of going through
Let's bring Declan
that
in on
trauma
this. Do you want to
here
make a
in
contribution to this point, Declan?
We've heard about balance here, about the balance of the child's rights, the unborn child's rights. The baby is on the scales on one side, and we have various rights on the other scales, the other side of the scales. And what we're being asked to do on Friday is take the baby off the scales entirely, not even to recognise it anymore.
Not at all.
We are. The referendum commission, the Supreme Court has already ruled that the only right that the unborn child has is the rights covered by the 8th Amendment to the Constitution. We take the baby off the scales. If we vote yes on Friday, we must vote no and come back to this issue
Well,
again.
I think that very crude depiction of the scenario is actually at the root of this problem.
You're the one that's talked about...
Because I have, but I haven't talked crudely about taking babies off
I'm not talking about
scales,
crude.
Declan.
Speaking about the individual
I
that
think
will
that would be very
lose
respectful.
their
what
rights
I hear-
in this situation
I have to tell you,
is not crude.
what
the
I hear-
baby is what is at question.
Okay, you've made the point.
What I hear is a very crude, reductionist misrepresentation of the position that entirely ignores that in the scenario you have a fully grown, fully sentient woman or child who is the carrier of the pregnancy. I hear no recognition from it. Maybe you're not able to walk in somebody else's shoes or to actually understand the predicament in the real world, not the world of black and white that perhaps you occupy, but in the real world, the predicaments in which people find themselves and the heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching decisions that people have to make. You see, us as legislators, we have to be cognizant of that because we have an obligation beyond our own sense of things to provide in the collective interest, and we have to recognise the experiences
I have to cut across
of
all
women.
of you.
I
I'm
trust the
sorry, Declan.
Constitution
You're going to have to
with
wait.
human rights.
Unfortunately, we need to take a break. But after the break, if you're still undecided, find out what our panel will say to you at home about why you should vote to retain or repeal the 8th Amendment. That's after this. Teresa, you made a big pitch at the start about saving the 8th Amendment. But is that only because it makes us feel good about ourselves, somehow moral and virtuous, when the reality is because of the 13th and 14th Amendments, the right to information, the right to travel, the reality that thousands of women travel every year to have abortions, that in reality, it's almost worthless?
Well, I don't think it is worthless, and I think it's undisputed that the 8th Amendment has saved lives, and we're thinking about future generations as well. And we're thinking about if, in the event of repeal, this matter goes to politicians, they may feel that it's quite restrictive at the moment, but there is no question that when abortion laws are introduced into any jurisdiction, the laws broaden, they widen, they get worse.
But do you not trust politicians? Because after all, the politicians, for better or worse, are elected by all of us, the people, to do our will. I mean, what other alternative do you have to having elected
I don't
politicians
trust them on
making
this issue.
decisions?
This is an issue
Just in this
that
issue.
should belong at all times to the people. And, you know, Mary Lou, you mentioned earlier on about the offence, the destruction of unborn human life, and it carries a maximum sentence of 14 years. You know, this has been waved about a lot at the moment, and I think it's quite disingenuous because, first of all, no one has ever been prosecuted. No one has even been charged with this offence. And, in fact, an amendment bill was proposed by the Green Party and other politicians in 2017, and it was proposed to reduce that 14-year penalty to a fine of €1. And Fine Gael said no. Simon Harris said the fine wouldn't defend and vindicate the unborn's right to life as far as practicable. But now Fine Gael and you indeed are relying on that 14-year sentence.
Trusting the politicians. Take your own case, Micheál. You know, your Ardèche endorsed a pro-life position in the last general election. You specifically told me in an interview you were pro-life and opposed to change. You know, people talk about trust and talk about your journey.
Well, first of all, I think I have said I've gone on a journey, and I made it very clear that, for example, in terms of fetal abnormality for the last 2 to 3 years, that I had an open mind on that. But there's nothing wrong with actually, when you look at the evidence and you assess how it impacts other people. I have my personal views. I'm not a personal advocate of abortion. I do come from a pro-life perspective, but I'm not prepared in conscience to force women who have a diagnosis of a fatal fetal abnormality to go to Liverpool into the future. I'm just not prepared to do it as a legislator, and neither am I prepared to force a woman who's been a victim of rape or incest, particularly a young child or a teenager, to have to go through the full pregnancy. And that's why when I make that assessment, I've made it. And I'm going to stand by it, because in conscience I can do nothing
Mary
else.
Lou, what do you reckon the undecided are making of what's going on at the moment? The strong opinions that we've heard tonight, in the Pat Kenny show earlier, in other debates, other discussions and interviews. We've had very strong opinions on both sides. But what about the people in the middle ground? What are they supposed to think if they're undecided as to how to vote?
Well, I mean, trust has been cited repeatedly. People need to trust themselves, and I have the strongest sense from being across doorsteps and speaking to people that Irish society has been on a journey. Micheál hasn't been on his own on this issue. People really want to do the right thing, and this isn't. It's not a case of anybody being an advocate for abortion.
That's right.
We're advocating for women. We're advocating for health. We're advocating for choice in the most difficult of circumstances. We're advocating for honesty. We're advocating for grown-up politics. We're advocating to move away from the English solution to an Irish problem. So all of those things are in play. And I would just say to people, you've heard the stories. And you've heard some stories, and let me acknowledge, there are for some people, abortion will never, ever, ever be an option. I respect that and I recognise it. And I don't think that's going to change. But in circumstances where the personal testimony is given, I think Irish people are real enough, grounded enough and generous enough to factor that very heavily in their
Declan,
decision.
it's your turn to answer that same question.
We've heard about politicians being on a journey. We all have a journey to make on Friday. And on Friday, those of us that decide to make the journey to a polling booth, we take on the power, maybe for the only time in our lives, and I hope the only time in our lives, of life and death. That is an awesome power to exercise. And what I am asking people to do is go into that polling booth and on this occasion, vote no. Restrain from a yes vote. Do not take away the rights of these children so that they can be lawfully killed. And if you do that, I can assure you that these politicians will make a journey back here again with a less extreme proposal, and we will have this debate again, and we will deal with the difficult circumstances.
No, we
but
can't.
what is being proposed is too extreme.
Which is wrong.
Vote no on Friday. We'll be back here again with something that is much more rational.
You see, Micheál Martin, there's a lot of people who are confused. They've heard this pretty incessantly over the last 3 months, and they're confused. They hear experts, legal experts, medical experts on both sides. They want to do the right thing. What would you say to them if they're still undecided?
Well, actually, I've met a lot of those people on the doorsteps who are undecided, who are conflicted.
And mean well.
And mean very well, but they want to look after women who are in crisis pregnancies. They don't believe, actually, that a woman who's a victim of rape or a teenager of incest or a child should have to go through the full pregnancy. They want this resolved. They're edging towards taking it out of the Constitution and voting for repeal. And I think, from my experience on the doorsteps and engaging with people and having conversations with people, because it's not black and white, I accept that. There's a lot of grey in life, as we know. But the bottom line I would say to people is, ask yourself the question, are you prepared to force your views on others, and particularly vulnerable women in crisis pregnancy situations? Are you prepared to do that? I think the majority of people are not now. They want to change.
Indeed, the issue of rape cases, the hard cases, but they are very, very real. Do you believe, and I put this to both of you, Declan and Teresa, do you believe that in a situation such as that, that a woman who has been the victim of rape should be compelled to give birth to the child?
The way you put that, it sounds terrible. And
But isn't
as
that
you
the
said, it's
reality
not
of it?
black and white. But there was a young girl during the week who publicly stated, which is why I can mention it, Miss C, that she felt forced into the abortion, and she woke up and said, "Where's my baby?" So, you know,
Teresa, you
nothing
didn't
is
answer
black
Matt's
and white.
question.
I
You didn't
think-
answer
I
Matt.
tell
You said it's terrible.
We're talking about exceptional cases all night and for the last
Well, let's
3
deal
months.
with those
But
exceptional
why
cases.
didn't?
No, seriously, let's
why
deal with that
aren't those
exceptional case.
exceptional cases the subject of this referendum? Why is it? This,
Because
you know,
we already
you talked
explained
about
it's
your
not
journey,
possible
Micheál, and
legally.
I completely understand and sympathise. And I know you've allowed free vote in your party, and that people can follow their conscience. And I applaud you for that.
But can you answer the question,
The
but-
please?
question was very
People-
specific, and it was a yes or no question, in fairness. Should that woman be obliged to carry the baby?
I'll answer it, but I want to give a proper answer. I would not force anybody, of course, to go through such a thing. And if a young girl has been raped of the age that you mentioned, she's been statutorily raped, she's been raped, whatever it may be, in that situation, I think we need to take a step back. And after this referendum, and before the next one, I think we need to have a very serious discussion about raising the barriers to why rape is such a problem. Rapists are not
Are
sufficiently
you going to answer the
punished.
question, Declan?
I did answer the question. I said I wouldn't do it. And what we do need to do here is we need to make the price of rape much, much more expensive than it is for those that perpetrate it.
So here's your problem.
You are proposing to strip away the rights of unborn children as some sort of solution to a rape problem.
Sorry.
That we cover up the whereabouts of rapists in this country. We don't have an ability to track where they are. In America, you can track where they
it's
are.
for balance. I need to bring Mary Lou in.
Can I just say, so here's the central problem with the argument that you present, because you are now saying, or at least you are, Declan, I'm not sure what you're saying, Teresa, that in fact such a rape victim should not be compelled to carry that pregnancy to term. And you said, well, we'll deal with it. We deal with it by repealing the Eighth Amendment.
No, we don't.
No.
We
No,
deal with it
no, that's
sorry,
false.
Sorry,
Okay,
that is
you've all
that
we're
is
actually
not
out
false.
of
That
time.
is the
We're actually
fact.
out of time, and that concludes our coverage here on TV3 of the debate. But can I say that we've had a great response to the duo here and perhaps the blossoming relationship?
You said
politically?
you wouldn't say that. Come on, you said you wouldn't.
It's gone down very well on Twitter and all the social media that I don't understand.
Okay,
Say
thank
that right.
you
You've been at it
to
for-
all
you've
of
been at
you.
it for
Stay
years,
with us
Ivan.
tomorrow morning's front pages after the break.